Geshe Wange played an important role was because when we had the CIA training, he was the Tibetan teacher to the trainees. And they developed this Tibetan Morse code, which is the signal they use to convey messages from inside Tibet to the State Department here in Washington, D.C. Where it's located, it's called Foggy Bottom. So sometimes people call State Department as also the Foggy Bottom. Or this Cheni, Devato Stabare, 61, she came. 62, then 4 people came on the invitation of Sopo Geshe Wange. When he asked His Holiness what he can do, then His Holiness said, take some lamas to teach English. So you find one person here right now in California, in Northern California, in this city itself called Lama Kunga Rinpoche. He's a Sakya Lama. He's still here. If you still want to meet him, he must be now 85 or 86 years old. He's very much here. He moved to California in 1970s. Or if you're interested about Tibetans, then Tibetan history and how people moved here, then you still have people. Tatang Rinpoche is also here, but he doesn't meet too many people. 62, 4 people, Rinpoche, Kunga Lama Rinpoche, and Soba Rinpoche. Now Soba Rinpoche again became instrumental because he was in fact the first professor in an American university. So he was teaching in the Wisconsin University. Actually, Professor many of his students are now experts on Tibet, particularly in the Chicago area. His place is called Deer Park. He built that monastery in Wisconsin. And there are 2 other lamas who were young at that time, and they used to go to Colgate College to learn English and play with the young American students to learn conversation and all that. So 1962, then these 2 young boys were sent back to India thinking that they might get spoiled. Then the 2 elder ones stayed, one is here. Then 1963, we sent our first representative of His Holiness to Washington, to New York. So we established, there was Liu Sha. Liu Sha was the first representative of His Holiness to the United States in 1963. And Liu Sha was also a senior member in the Foreign Office of Tibet before we lost our independence. Since he could not speak English, with the help of CIA, the Office of Tibet was registered in New York under FARA, Foreign Agents Regulation Act. Then 64, we formally registered the office, which still exists in Washington, D.C. because we moved our office during Lobsang Singha's time from New York to Washington, D.C. Then 65, around that time, 2 of Shagapa's sons were also there. And one son was working for Pan Am at that time. I think some United American Airlines, in those days it was Pan Am. 2 sons were there. And there were very few people in New York alone, some 4, 5, 6, 7 people. In Boston, one Tibetan moved. His is also a very interesting story, but I won't go into all the details. But he was the first Tibetan to write to an American president asking whether he could stay in the United States or not. And the president at that time was Johnson. Then 65. Then 67, we sent 6 lumberjacks to Maine. Maine Kawai Mahaguiwa, North Relations, to turn it into advocacy material, because you can't tell when you go and meet a congressman, you won't have 5 hours to explain about Tibet. You might get 30 minutes, you might get 15 minutes, depending on how the appointment was fixed. So within that time frame, you have to explain about Tibet. So there has to be clarity in how or what you need to focus on and what should be the ask. And we have also restructured a little bit the functions of the offices of Tibet, because earlier Now, in the United States alone, we have about 25 Tibetan associations. And much of the representatives' time are spent on the invitation of the Tibetan associations to visit them, and that also happens on the weekends. So during my time, in my 1 year and 3 months, I spent 28 weekends visiting the Tibetan communities in North America. So when you have to deal with so many Tibetan associations, then you are dealing with mostly internal matters regarding Tibet, not external advocacy for Tibet. So we need to change that. So what we have decided to do is we have created 2 posts, one in Washington DC and one in our office in Brussels. Just to give you one more information, we have offices of Tibet in Japan, responsible for East Asia and some parts of Southeast Asia. We have one office in Taiwan, only for Taiwan, one in Canberra for New Zealand, Australia, and some parts of Southeast Asia. Delhi office is responsible from Thailand to Middle East, but we are not able to go beyond India. We have one office in Kathmandu for Nepal, one in Moscow for Central Asia, one in Pretoria, Joburg, for the whole of Africa. We are not able to go beyond South Africa. Then we have one office in 3 offices in Europe, one in Geneva for Southern Europe, mostly German speaking, then Brussels, from Portugal to Spain to Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, these countries, and then one office in London, responsible for Iceland, UK, the whole of Scandinavia, and the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland also. That comes under London office. And we have one office in DC for North America, and we opened one office in Sao Paulo just a few years ago for the whole of South America. So we have to reach out to the world through these 12 offices, and each of these offices has only about 3-4 people, or at the maximum 5 people. So that is how scarce our human and financial resource is, right? So despite all this, the Sino-Tibet conflict is well known to the world, mainly because of the effort of His Holiness the Dalai Lama over the last 60 years. Now it's up to us, now it's incumbent upon us to see whether we can catch up with what one person, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, did. Now we have to pool all our energies together. So that is why we started this VTAC, the Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group, where we expect the younger generations of Tibetans to take the lead in advocacy work. So Department of Information and International Relations, once you form an advocacy group here, then they will be responsible in dissemination of information to you, in updating and providing information to you. The Office of Tibet is also here. Nawala has joined me here from Washington DC. She just joined about 3 months ago, so she is right now dealing with the Tibetan communities and also maybe handle VTAC for the time being till we find another person to deal with the Tibetan associations. So these 2 offices will be responsible for dealing with the Tibetan associations. The representatives will now have to focus on parliaments, governments, think tanks, and media. These 4 main institutions. So it's generally what is understood as action for movement is to go on the streets and shout, make some noise, and that is considered as doing something for the cause. That's also one. But this used to be the main means for the Tibetans who, in the 60s and 70s, because they were not educated like us. Our parents who came from Tibet, they couldn't speak any other language. The only thing they had was patriotism with them, nationalism with them, but no education, no experience.